dear people that God loves, I stand here primarily this afternoon in a spirit of gratitude. Gratitude to each of you here. My brothers in Latin America have told me many stories of this school. They've also shared with me the wonderful people that have walked with them during their years over here. And it is to each of you that I say a very sincere thank you for what you have been and what you are doing for young people today. As I stand here and look down, I see all these young faces here and up there. And I remind myself that this is the reason that I and many others of my brothers left home at young ages to follow the vision of Blessed Edmund Rice. It is for these young people. And a few moments ago, I had the great privilege, the honor of listening to some young people. And I know that God speaks through them. And if you ever doubt that God speaks through them, just look at their eyes and look at their hope and remind yourself that this is the reason that the school exists. I would like to say something and share something with all of you today about an Edmund Rice school and what is at the heart of an Edmund Rice school. And in order to do that, I want to start with a few stories. You'll have to pardon the personal experience, but God speaks to us through these, and I can only speak to you about the experience of God that I have had, in the hope that in my naming it, you might be able to remind yourself of how God speaks to you. The first story takes place in Calcutta, in India. And it was a time when I was provincial of the Brothers in India, and I was visiting the free school in Calcutta. It's called St. George's. And St. George's had an open day. They had all the work done by the children, their artwork, the projects, so that parents would come and have a look at it. And also invited, it was an open day, so there were no real invitations. People were allowed to come in and have a look at the school. Now, this is a free school, so only really poor children would go to that school. And I was struck by one young boy, and I knew he was a street boy in the sense that he lived on the streets. And he was standing there with his hand up here and looking around. And he was looking at the games that the children were able to play. And I went over to him and I said to him, "Do you want something from here? You know, little balls and marbles and kites and things like that." And he did a very strange thing. He came right up to me. Children in India don't do that. He came right up to me and he caught hold of my trousers and he said to me, in answer to my request, "What do you want?" He said, "Send me to school." And God help us, my heart went out to that little child. Because I said to myself, even at that age, he knows that the only thing that will take him away from the streets is an education. And I tell you that story because it's so easy for us to forget that there are thousands upon thousands of children who never have the advantage of a school or a schooling that you have. And that it is so important from time to time in your lives to stop and thank God for the gifts that God has given you and given me, and we take for granted. Anytime I found teaching difficult, I think of that little boy. My second story is also from India. It's much more recent. It's of a mother who was a worker in one of our schools. And she was a very bubbly person, full of energy and full of life and always laughing, and she would shout out to you from across the room. And this morning, she was very, very quiet. And I went over to her and I said to her, her name was Malti. I said, Malti, what's wrong with you? You're so quiet today. And she sort of smiled and said, no, nothing. And I said, no, Malti, tell me, what's wrong? And she said, last night when I went home, I realized that we didn't have enough food in the house. And I have two little boys. And one of the boys, I gave them a little bit of bread and some tea. And at the end of it, one of the boys came to me and says, Mommy, I'm hungry. And she said, I couldn't give him anything. I didn't have anything in the house. And he kept on, Mommy, I'm hungry. Mommy, I'm hungry. And she got so upset that she slapped him. And he started crying, and he went to bed and he cried. And then she said to me, do you know what it is for a mother to have to say to her son, I can't feed you, I have nothing more to give you. And for that child to go home hungry, do you know what it does to a mother's heart? These are two small stories, but they remind us of people around the world. And one of the opportunities I have is of moving around the world to where our brothers live and work, and seeing situations like this and feeling terribly helpless. And you know what? So much of my time is spent traveling, like coming around here this time, and up in the plane, and they come along and give you a meal. And I get that tray, and it's full of stuff. And I look at it, and I think of the people that just don't have it. And I find it almost impossible to swallow a morsel. When I think of our schools, and I think of the time when I went to school, and the brothers who taught me, and they were wonderful men. It's because of them that I joined the brothers. But they taught me really how to pass an exam, and how important it was to pass an exam. But they also taught me the value of hard work, of thinking about others, and so on. Today, that's not enough in an Edmund Rice school. It's not enough. We have that, and it's good to do that, and it's important to do that, but it's not enough. The Maltese of our world and the little street boys of our world say to us that that is not enough. We have to educate these young people over here to speak out for those who cannot speak out, because you have the voice to do it. You have 2 languages in this school through which to communicate. An extraordinary privilege. But if you only speak about yourself and your own interests, then the school has failed. You are here to think about those who cannot speak for themselves. You are the voice for the voiceless. We are told Edmund Rice opened his whole heart to Christ, present and appealing to him in the poor. His whole heart. To you, dear people, I can honestly say that I have never opened my whole heart. I have opened my heart, but my whole heart? There are always elements of my heart that are locked away for myself and my comforts and my agenda. But Edmund Rice opened his whole heart. And that's why we speak about blessed Edmund Rice. Our teachers over here, I want our teachers to realize that they're more than just the passers on of knowledge. They're the passers on of a vision. And the vision is the vision of Jesus. My congregation in many parts of the world will be dying. You can experience it here in Uruguay. There are no brothers apart from one. In the Western world, it's dying. It's getting younger members in Africa, India, and the developing world. And so brothers speak to me and say, how does it feel to preside over the demise, the death of a congregation? And I always say, to me, the question doesn't make sense. I'm not here to promote the congregation of Christian brothers. My loyalty is not to the congregation of Christian brothers, nor is my loyalty to the Catholic Church. My loyalty is to the vision and the mission of Jesus. I left home at the age of 14 for that. I didn't know it at that time, but that's the reason I left. And anyone who wants to be a member of a staff in a Christian school has to have that same loyalty to the vision and the mission of Jesus. And you parents in this hall, that's the same loyalty you have. To limit your loyalty to your family or to your job is to let down the reason for your life. We are here for the vision and mission of Jesus. And when I'm in India, where Christians are 2% of a population of 1 billion plus people, I have the same message to them, Hindus and Muslims and all alike. We are here for the vision and the mission of Jesus. Because Jesus never came to found a religion. Jesus came to tell us that life could be lived differently. Jesus came to tell us that human relationships could be different. Jesus came to tell us that there was a different set of values by which we could live life. And so many of my Hindu friends they say to me, we believe in the vision of Jesus. They may not be Christians, but they have everything about the vision of Jesus. And here's something that will surprise you now. We run a number of schools in India, the Christian Brothers, Edmund Rice schools in India. But we also have a number of Hindus and Sikhs as principals of those schools. And you say to yourself, how can a person of another religion be the principal, the one who holds the values and the vision in a Christian school? And I'll say to you out of experience that it is possible and it's happening. And these people are amazing people, the way they live their lives. And they will ensure that all the practices that we hold in a Christian school are there faithfully followed, but much more than that. They hold that all the other religions are also encouraged to live the Jesus vision. We can live our lives so small otherwise in fighting about religion. Love people. People make the difference. You might ask yourself, why do we want to stay as a Christian brother school? And I say, you're not a Christian brother school. You're an Edmund Rice school. And there's a subtle difference. A Christian brother school will have the values of the Christian brothers. And if God wanted those values to continue, God could bring Christian brothers out of the very stones, as Jesus said. But the time has come when those values have to be moved on. And you have an Edmund Rice school. And I would say to the principal, and I would say to the staff, you are now the carriers of the vision for Edmund Rice. You don't have to continue to do the things the Christian brothers did. That was good for that time. Now, God has chosen you. And if God has chosen you, God will give you gifts that are necessary to take the values that the Christian brothers had and build on them into the future. I know at times my brothers get angry when I say this. But all I can say is, we are here for God's work and God's vision. And today is a new day. And it's a new time. And allow that spirit that is present in our world to take us into a new tomorrow. And it's you people that will do it. So when I hear about new things happening in these schools, I'm thrilled. 2 years ago, I was in Ireland for the meeting of the Edmund Rice Schools Trust in Ireland. It has 120 schools, formerly all run by the Christian brothers. Now, there's no Christian brother principal. All the principals there were lay people, men and women. And let me tell you that the energy in that room was amazing. To be among those people and see the fire with which they ran their schools. And I turned to the provincial of the brothers in Ireland and said to him, our schools were never as vibrant as they are now. The church tells us this is the age of the laity, lay people. I want you all in this room to believe that. You have a spirituality that we need. If religious life is going to last into the future, we have to come to you to find out what we need to do. My challenge to you is to continue to listen to the Spirit in your midst. Believe that God speaks through you, just as much as God speaks through myself or the hierarchy in a church. The Holy Spirit is no respecter of persons, as the Bible constantly tells us. Chooses anyone. In Oceania, we have Edmund Rice Education Oceania. There were 40 schools that were in that trust. In the last 3 years, 27 other schools asked to join them. So the trust, if the Christian Brothers had been there, we'd still have 40 schools. That trust now has 67 schools. It's expanding. What is it saying? It's saying God doesn't need the Christian Brothers. God needs you. I'm going to give you a moment now, just for yourself. And I'm going to ask you to take a moment and say to yourself, if God speaks to me, if God speaks through me, why am I not able to share that message with others? Ask yourself that question. The answer, my dear people, is very simple. We don't trust ourselves and we don't believe that God speaks to us. And how I wish that you could believe that. How I wish that some of our smallest children here could be able to share with their friends and their parents. I thought there was a time in my life when I felt that God only spoke through important people. And then the brothers elected me as their leader. And the first thing that came to my mind when I was elected was, this is crazy. What are they doing? And one of my friends, a brother friend, came to me and he said, you're upset. I said, yes, this is crazy. I know nothing about leading a congregation. And the friend said a very important thing to me. He said to me, you are here not to continue the work that the last congregation leader was doing. And I'm saying that to people in charge. You're not here to continue the work the previous principal did, or that the brothers did. You are here to share something that God intends you to share with people. And so to this board that you have, I believe you have a gift that the school and the school community needs to hear. Trust that gift. Is this going to happen easily? No. There's a story told of a Jewish rabbi. And the Jewish rabbi, his name was Zusia. And Zusia was afraid that when he died and he stood before God, God would say to him, why weren't you as wise as Moses, or as brave as Abraham, or as generous as one of the others? And so he was always afraid that he'd be compared to someone else. And when the time came and he stood before God, God had only one question for him, and God said, Zusia, why didn't you live your life as Zusia? In other words, trust yourself and live your life, and don't worry about other people and how they're going to live their lives. I'm sorry to be repeating myself so often. But if I come over here and I'm asked to share something with you, I want to share with you the one piece that is so important for all of us. That this God I talk about is alive and real, and not up there somewhere, but here in our midst. And God speaks to you as much as God speaks to me. Listen to this God. And before I finish, I would like to speak about what does a school community, this is a school community, what does a school community really do? And the answer is very simple. It loves. Have you ever thought of the early church? The early church, if you read about it in the Acts or read any stories about the early church, they had no schools, they had no dispensaries, they had no social services, and yet they made an impact on society. Why? We are told very simply, when other people saw them, they said, see how these Christians love one another. That's all. See how they love one another. That's what you're invited to be, a community that loves one another. And that love will make a huge difference in this city. If there's anything that I'm going to take away, I'm taking away lots from my visit here today, but one of the very strong things that I'm taking away is the sense of family that I get as I move around. You have a great gift here, the sense of family. Looking at children, passing classrooms, the friendliness that is there is a great gift for you. Appreciate that gift, because a time will come in your lives when you'll be dying for friends. You'll feel so lonely. These are the people, your school friends, that will stand by you then. We love one another. That's what we are here for. People ask me, what do you do? I say, I'm a storyteller. I tell stories from one part of the world, from what I see in one place, and I go and share them with somewhere else. And that is gospel. That is good news, how it is actually being lived today. Let me finish with this story. It has to do with waiting, with patience. We all want things to happen very fast. It's not going to work out that way. I'm going to take the example of Mary, the mother of Jesus. There were two great moments of waiting in Mary's life. One, the 9 months when Jesus was in her womb, she was waiting for Jesus to be born, for new life to come. And the second time was after Jesus died, she waited with the apostles for the birth of the church. Waiting is important. And as you parents wait for your children to grow up, as you teachers wait for the seeds you sow to bear fruit, as administrators wait for the fruit of their efforts to be born, we have to go through that process of waiting in quiet. And this story tells us something about it. It's a story taken from a book by Sue Monk Kidd, When the Heart Waits. And she says, When my son Bob was in elementary school, I had an after-school parent-teacher meeting. Bob had come by bicycle that day, so he wouldn't have to hang around for the meeting to end. I saw him on his way to the bike rack when I arrived. "Will your meeting be long?" he asked. "It might," I said, "but I'll be home as soon as I can." When I left the meeting at 4:00, I actually stumbled over Bob, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor, leaning against the lunchroom door. "I waited for you, Mama," he said, leaping up. "But you didn't have to wait," I protested. "I know. I just wanted to give you this." And he thrust a crinkled sheet of notebook paper under my nose. On the front was a drawing of an aeroplane, an uneven row of tulips, and a fat yellow sun. Opening the message, I read, "I love you." I looked down at my son, overwhelmed that I could be the object of so much devotion that my son would wait an hour and a half in a deserted school corridor with a love note squeezed in his hand. I pulled him against me, so close that he said, "I can hear your heart beating, Mama, against my ear." I held him even closer, delighting in my child who was delighting in me. That's what happens when we wait in the posture of Mary. We delight in God who delights in us. "Maybe it's the mother in me," says Sue Monk Kidd. "But I refuse to believe that God, who is like a mother to us all, doesn't also delight in such watchfulness and devotion, the kind that keeps us waiting even when we don't have to. When we sit like Mary, in quiet, our hearts attentive, thinking of the people we love, our very posture says, 'I love you, God.' And sometimes, though not always, the moment rises inside us like a sound, and we can almost hear God's heart beating against ours. My dear people of God, I came over here to say thank you to you. I came here to remind you that you are beautiful people, and that my own congregation is deeply, deeply grateful to you for what you do, and more important, for who you are. And I want to tell you again that you are loved, even beyond the shores of this place, that the stories of this school have spread across our congregation, and your own loyalty and the way that you are able to look beyond the confines of the school to people less privileged than you is an affirmation for us, but it's also a great encouragement to us. Thank you for all that you do. Please continue to grow in love. Amen.